J. Vera and Walnut here to review the Glossier You Perfume Discovery Set. But first, welcome to Easygoing Scents.
Hooray! Yay!
I bought this discovery set at Sephora for $15. It was a rare in-store purchase for me. And yes, this cute little box sits in the checkout lane to try and tempt you to make an impulse buy on your way out. I'm going to do this review a little differently. First, I'll talk about the history of Glossier, which is a billion-dollar company that was started by a blogger. Then I'll walk you through how I first experienced the scents, which I have on a little tray right here. And I'll talk about what I learned about the ingredient ambroxan along the way. Glossier was founded in 2014 by Emily Weiss. She had created the beauty blog Into the Gloss 4 years earlier while she was working as a fashion assistant at Vogue magazine. If you don't know, fashion magazines like Vogue are called glossies because of their glossy pages. I'm guessing her blog was called Into the Gloss because it gave people a behind the scenes look at what it's like working at the glossy magazines. After Into the Gloss became a massively popular blog, Weiss decided to use it as a platform to launch her own skincare and beauty brand. She named it Glossier to make it a faux French word that refers to the glossies. From the start, Glossier had a simple, understated beauty aesthetic. In their marketing and advertising, models were often seen sporting a look that is now called the no makeup look. Instead of selling people a 10-step skincare routine or heavy makeup products, Glossier was selling the idea that you could use light, simple products to accentuate your natural beauty rather than change how you look. This is an important element of the brand that carried through when Glossier You, their first fragrance, came out in 2017. People often describe Glossier You as being a your skin but better fragrance. This phrasing was borrowed from the beauty world. Instead of using thick foundation that was more popular in the past, people started using tinted moisturizers and BB or CC creams that were often marketed as being your skin but better. Similarly, sheer lip colors were referred to as your lips but better and marketed in contrast to the old school lipstick that was thicker, darker, or brighter and covered your natural lip color instead of enhanced it. This sort of marketing isn't exclusive to Glossier, but it is a foundation of their brand. We'll come back to the your skin but better idea as it pertains to the perfume, but first let's jump into my experiences with the Glossier scents. If you watched my last two videos, which were reviews of Sephora Favorites sampler sets, then you'll know that I encountered Glossier You Doux and Glossier You Reve, and didn't have a very good experience with either one of them. To my nose, both of these fragrances had a syrupy, burnt, chemically fiery smell to them that almost instantly made me feel overwhelmed and nauseous. To use the fragrance community slang, they were scrubbers, which meant I had to run to the bathroom to try to scrub them off of me before they made me feel sick. Because I had already heard a lot about the Glossier fragrances and knew they were your skin but better scents, this reaction that I had completely caught me off guard. I wondered why something that smells like a subtle skin scent to everyone else would feel completely noxious and off-putting to me. Of course, I turned to the internet for answers. I found some people who hate Glossier You fragrances with a passion, and they were blaming their dislike of these scents on an ingredient called ambroxan. Ambroxan is a synthetic ingredient designed to mimic ambergris. Ambergris is a waxy substance that forms in the intestines of sperm whales. Historically, ambergris has been used in perfume partly because of how it smells, but primarily because it helps fragrances last longer. As you can imagine, ambergris is really expensive and hard to source since it's only found inside of a specific type of whale. For that reason, most modern perfumery uses synthetic substitutes for ambergris, like ambroxan. When researching ambroxan, I learned that 20% of people are anosmic to it, which means they don't smell anything at all. A tiny percent of people say that to them, ambroxan smells like burning rubber or an electrical fire. Whether or not a person can smell ambroxan and what ambroxan smells like to them is thought to be dependent on genetics, specifically the OR7A17 gene. This difference in olfactory perception is often compared to differences in the taste of cilantro. To most people, cilantro tastes like the green herb that it is. But thanks to differences in the OR6A2 gene, up to 20% of people experience cilantro as tasting like soap. A smaller unknown percentage of people taste cilantro as being metallic or like pennies. So after smelling Glossier You Do and You Reve and reading all about ambroxan online, I decided that what I smelled is somewhat in the realm of burning rubber or an electrical fire. I concluded that I must be one of the few people who smell ambroxan negatively. I didn't bother sampling the other two fragrances in the set, and I set the whole thing aside because I assumed that it would make me sick. Then I learned that a perfume I really like is known to contain a lot of ambroxan. No, I can no longer remember which perfume it was. I have been literally sampling about 100 perfumes a month for the last 5 months, so who knows? But learning that a perfume I like contained a lot of ambroxan really confused me, and I realized I need to smell ambroxan in isolation to determine whether or not it's the culprit of this noxious smell. I again turned to the internet. I found out that a perfume called Escentric Molecule 2 contains only ambroxan as the fragrance oil within it. I ordered a sample vial of that along with the other Escentric Molecule scents, which I will review in a future video. And to my surprise, Molecule 2 did not smell like a chemical fire to me. Actually, it didn't smell bad at all. In fact, it reminded me of many marine scents that I've smelled before. It smelled fresh, salty, mineralic, and kind of like sea spray bouncing off of rocks. That made me wonder if there is some other fragrance in Glossier You Do and You Reve that is off putting to me. That said, I've learned that the same perfume ingredient can smell completely different at different concentrations. So it could be that the concentration of ambroxan used in Molecule 2 is something that I like, while the concentration used in these two fragrances is something that I find off putting. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to do more research to get to the bottom of this one. Either way, after smelling Escentric Molecule 2, I no longer felt afraid of ambroxan, so I went ahead, pulled out the Glossier scent, and sampled the last two fragrances in there. These are Glossier You and Glossier You Fleur. They're nice. They're fine. I don't think either one of them is full bottle worthy for me, but I don't find anything offensive in them. I had no reason to be afraid. They both feel very clean, mineral like, and perfectly unisex. I can tell that their base is ambroxan because they do both smell fairly similar to Escentric Molecule 2. I'd say Glossier You is like Escentric Molecule 2 with a little bit of woodiness added. Whereas Glossier You Fleur is like Escentric Molecule 2 with a little bit of sugar and floral added. As time goes on and these fragrances evolve, they both kind of smell like rocks to me. Smelling these fragrances made me realize how little I know about minerals. I frequently smell salt because I use it in my cooking and on my food, so I can recognize what salt smells like. And while both of these smell salty, I suspect they also smell like other minerals, but I don't actually know the scent associated with any other minerals other than salt. Even though there's a tiny bit of nature in each of these, with the wood in Glossier U and the floral in Glossier Fleur, they both smell fairly sterile to me, like something that would come out of a lab. Okay, back to the your skin but better aspect of the Glossier fragrances. I learned that long before the Glossier You fragrances and the Escentric Molecule fragrances and other ambroxan forward fragrances. Ambroxan was largely an ingredient that sat in the background. Perfumers knew what it was, of course, but perfume enthusiasts did not. Just like ambergris of the past, ambroxan was being used as a fixative to hold all the other fragrance ingredients together and as something to help scents last longer. It's also my understanding that ambroxan was routinely added to fragrances to make them fresher, more modern, and less perfumey smelling. Then, this new wave of fragrances, including Escentric Molecule 2 and Glossier You, made ambroxan the star of the show by putting it in the notes list. I don't know enough about perfumery to know exactly what kind of concentration of ambroxan was being used before and then started being used when this trend began. But apparently, this fixative or fragrance extender that had sat in the background of fragrances was now being used in much higher quantities. So it was noticeable on its own. It wasn't just accentuating the other things in there. And allegedly, ambroxan, along with some other synthetic ingredients, are particularly sensitive to skin chemistry. So that's where the Your Skin But Better comes in. It is this fresh, somewhat mineralic, musky scent that is supposed to smell kind of skin like on its own, but it's also supposed to change in response to your skin. That's why Glossier You has been marketed as something very unique, because it's supposed to smell like a different perfume on each person who wears it. I'm not quite sure where I'm landing on this concept personally. I'm not a perfumer, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But to me, it kind of feels like the Your Skin But Better claim is a bit of a gimmick. If I understand correctly, all perfume is responsive to skin chemistry. Perfume is essentially a live chemistry experiment that happens on our skin. The way it smells changes based on body temperature, air temperature, the pH balance, whether or not you're sweating, maybe even based on what you've eaten or what your hormonal levels are. Also, like I said, I've been testing about 100 perfumes a month for 5 months now. There are some, like I mentioned in a previous video, Donna Born in Roma, that I've noticed is very responsive to skin chemistry and smells different almost every time I wear it. Some fragrances also smell completely different when I smell them on test strips compared to when I spray them on my skin. But in my experience, the Glossier You fragrances smell the exact same on paper test strips as they do on my skin. And they smell the exact same each time I've tested them, which kind of leaves me doubting that they're just so responsive to skin chemistry that they become literally a different perfume for each person. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on Glossier You and other ambroxan forward fragrances? Also, what are your thoughts on ambroxan in general, if you're familiar with it? I went on a complete emotional roller coaster for a few weeks thinking I hated ambroxan. And based on what I'm reading in online communities, I think a lot of people probably have a similar experience. And I'd love to clear up any misconceptions. I think there are people who believe they hate ambroxan, even though they probably don't. The reason I think that is the more reading I've done, the more I've learned that ambroxan is in almost all new perfumes that are being created, at least in small quantities. So if it's so noxious that a person hates it, logically, they would hate the majority of perfumes currently on the market. Plus, the few peer reviewed studies I was able to find report that the majority of people find ambroxan to be pleasant and fresh smelling. Because ambroxan is so widely used and now it's made its way into mainstream popularity and it's being listed in notes lists, I'm wondering if it's becoming a scapegoat because it's one of the few behind the scenes chemicals that perfume enthusiasts actually know about. If someone dislikes two perfumes that list ambroxan in their notes list, it makes sense that they would draw the conclusion that they dislike ambroxan. But the reality is, most perfumes that contain ambroxan don't list it in their notes list. And like I said earlier, 20% of people can't smell ambroxan at all. It appears walnut can smell ambroxan. Good job, bud. I know this video was a little more technical than normal, so thank you to everyone who watched until the end. If there are any perfumers in the crowd, I would love to hear whatever inside knowledge you have on ambroxan, and if I get any of the details wrong, please feel free to correct me. Bye!